Rami Al-Sayeed was a powerful sheikh known for his wealth and influence. But when Anna Miller, his American girlfriend, refused to be silenced by a $500,000 bribe, his pride turned deadly. Karim Hassan, his most loyal associate, and Layla Mansour, a silent witness, trapped by fear, became unwilling keepers of a dark secret that would expose the dangerous cost of power, betrayal, and obsession. Sheikh Rami Al-Farouk was a man whose power stretched far beyond the glittering skyline of Dubai. His name carried weight in business, politics, and society, but behind the carefully curated image of wealth and nobility was a man used to controlling everything and everyone around him. For years, Rami had built his empire not only on money, but on silence, keeping his reputation untarnished at all costs. Yet, in his private life, temptation had begun to erode the carefully laid foundation he worked so hard to protect. Anna Williams, an American woman with an adventurous spirit, had entered his life almost by accident. She had come to Dubai as a traveler, exploring the glamorous facade of the city, but her charm, independence, and refusal to be intimidated by wealth made her stand out. Rami was captivated. Their connection developed quickly. But what began as a secret affair soon spiraled into something much more dangerous. For Anna, this relationship was thrilling, yet fragile, and she knew she was walking a line that could collapse beneath her at any moment. While Rami promised her the world, he was also a married man. Layla Al-Farouk, his wife, was elegant, intelligent, and deeply aware of her husband's flaws. Though she maintained the appearance of a perfect spouse for the public eye, she had long suspected that Rami's attention wandered. But the truth was worse than she imagined. With Anna, it wasn't just another fleeting indulgence. It was becoming an obsession. Anna, however, was not naive. She realized Rami's promises were empty, and his wealth was meant to keep her quiet and compliant. When he eventually tried to bribe her with $500,000 to end things quietly, she was insulted. To her, the money represented nothing but an attempt to erase her existence, to turn her into another secret hidden in the shadows of his empire. She refused. Her rejection was more than defiance. It was a threat to the control Rami had always demanded. The refusal shook him in ways even he hadn't anticipated. Accustomed to people bending to his will, Rami found himself spiraling into anger and fear. He feared exposure, scandal, and the potential ruin of his reputation. But more than that, he feared losing control. Anna's independence was intoxicating, but it also made her dangerous in his eyes. Meanwhile, Anna confided in her younger sister, Sophie Williams. During late-night calls back home in the U.S., Sophie sensed her sister was involved in something risky but couldn't grasp the scale of it. Their father, David Williams, remained unaware of the depth of Anna's entanglement, though he often worried about her tendency to get caught up in dangerous situations abroad. As the tension escalated, Rami turned to his trusted aide, Karim had always been the man who cleaned up messes discreetly, handling matters in ways that never left a trace. To Karim, this was simply another problem to be solved. But to Rami, honest defiance was personal, far from the glamour of Dubai's skyscrapers and golden beaches. A dangerous game of pride, obsession, and betrayal had begun. Anna's refusal of Rami's bribe would soon ignite a chain of events that none of them could stop. The days following Anna's refusal grew darker. For Sheikh Rami, on the surface, he continued his life of lavish dinners, business meetings, and high-profile appearances. But underneath, his mind burned with a storm of resentment. To him, Anna had crossed an invisible line. It wasn't just her rejection of his bribe, it was the audacity to stand against him, to deny him control. His anger festered, blending with fear. If she decided to expose their affair, the consequences would reach far beyond his household. His political connections, business empire, and carefully curated public image could all crumble in an instant. Anna, however, refused to let fear dictate her choices. Though she knew who Rami was and what he was capable of, she didn't back down. She walked through the bustling streets of Dubai with her chin high, determined not to be another silent shadow in a man's life. But what she couldn't see was how closely she was being watched. Karim Haddad, Rami's loyal aide, had begun tailing her movements. To Karim, this wasn't personal. It was duty. His loyalty to Rami was unquestioned, and he understood that the Sheikh's entire empire was at stake. Layla Al-Farouk, meanwhile, began to notice subtle changes in her husband. Rami's temper was shorter, his late-night absences more frequent, and his paranoia more visible. Layla had always tolerated his indiscretions for the sake of appearances, but now she felt a chill in their home. She didn't yet know the details, but she could sense that something far more dangerous was brewing. Her instincts told her that whoever the other woman was, she had pushed Rami into unfamiliar territory that could end in blood. Back in America, Sophie Williams grew increasingly worried. Anna's phone calls became less frequent, and when they did connect, her sister sounded strained, evasive, as though she were holding back the truth. Sophie pleaded with her to come home, reminding her of the dangers of entangling herself with powerful men. But Anna brushed off her concerns, insisting she could handle it. Deep inside, though, Anna knew she was playing with fire. One evening, Rami requested Karim's presence in his private study. The room was dimly lit, filled with the scent of expensive cigars and the quiet hum of tension. Rami's voice was low but sharp as he laid out his fears, his frustrations, and his growing hatred for Anna's defiance. Karim listened carefully, knowing better than to question his employer. But when Rami hinted that this situation might require a permanent solution, Karim hesitated for the first time. Eliminating problems was something he had done before, but this was different. This was a woman who had once held Rami's heart, and the consequences of such an act would be enormous. Still, Rami's words carried the weight of command. If she will not stay silent, then she cannot remain at all, he said coldly, his face set like stone. Karim nodded, understanding the unspoken order. The noose around Anna was tightening. She remained unaware of how deeply Rami's obsession had curdled into hatred. Her refusal of his money had not freed her, it had sealed her fate. And in the silent corridors of Rami's mansion, plans were already being put in motion. Plans that would soon blur the line between passion and violence. Anna's world in Dubai was slowly turning into a cage she couldn't see. The glittering skyline and golden sands masked the invisible net being woven around her by Rami and his loyal aide. Karim! Everywhere she went, eyes followed her in marked cars parked near her apartment. Strangers lingering too long in the she frequented, and the faint sense of footsteps echoing behind her at night. At first, she brushed it off as paranoia, but her instincts whispered that she was being watched. Rami, on the other hand, was no longer the charming man who had swept her into a whirlwind romance. His once soft words had grown cold, edged with a menace she couldn't ignore. Whenever he managed to corner her into a conversation, his tone carried the weight of someone who believed ownership was his right. He reminded her of the bribe she had refused, almost as though her rejection had wounded his pride more deeply than any affair could. To Rami, her independence was not bravery, it was an insult. Karim, always silent and obedient, began implementing Rami's orders with precision. He tracked Anna's movements, compiled reports on her daily routines, and even bribed her building staff for access to her apartment's security footage. Yet, as he carried out these tasks, something unsettled him. He saw in Anna's face a determination, a strength that reminded him of his own sister who had once defied powerful men in their hometown. For the first time in years of loyal service, Karim felt a sliver of doubt creep into his mind. Layla Al-Farouk's suspicions were also growing, though Rami never spoke of Anna by name. Layla had seen the tension building in her husband's eyes. The restless pacing, the uncharacteristic anger when business meetings ended badly. She hired a private investigator, quietly and without Rami's knowledge, to confirm what her gut already told her, that another woman was involved. What Layla didn't yet realize was how dangerous this other woman's existence had become. Meanwhile, Sophie Williams, back in America, was losing sleep over Anna's silence. The messages grew shorter, the calls more infrequent. Sophie noticed how her sister's voice carried an undertone of fear, even when Anna tried to sound strong. Sophie began reaching out to contacts, exploring whether she could fly to Dubai. But the costs and logistics felt overwhelming. Still, she made a promise to herself. If Anna didn't come home soon, she would. One night, as Anna left a small art gallery she loved to visit, she felt that familiar prickle of being followed. Turning sharply, she caught a glimpse of a man stepping into the shadows. Her pulse quickened. When she hurried to her car, the engine sputtered before starting. as if someone had tampered with it. Driving away, she kept checking her mirrors, every set of headlights behind her, igniting panic. What Anna didn't know was that Rami had escalated his plan. He was done waiting for her to come around. The bribe had failed, persuasion had failed, and now he was convinced that only silence could protect him. He instructed Karim to prepare everything carefully. No mistakes, no loose ends. For Anna, the danger was no longer creeping in. The shadows, it was closing in. She was living on borrowed time, unaware that her fight for freedom was about to cross into a deadly game orchestrated by the very man who once swore to adore her. Anna's life had become a fragile balancing act, a desperate attempt to maintain normalcy while sensing that something sinister was growing around her. She forced herself to continue her routine working on her projects, attending social gatherings and checking in with Sophie to assure her she was fine. Yet beneath the surface, panic gnawed at her. Every phone call she received from an unknown number sent shivers down her spine. Every knock on her door made her heart race. It was as though she was waiting for the moment everything would collapse. Rami, on the other hand, was consumed with rage. To him, Anna's refusal was more than a rejection, it was humiliation. He had offered her money, protection, and the life of luxury most people could only dream of, but she dared to defy him. That defiance struck directly at his ego. In his world, power wasn't just about wealth, it was about control, and Anna's resistance had become an unforgivable insult. His pride transformed into obsession, and his obsession began to harden into a plan for destruction. Karim watched closely as Rami's anger intensified. He had seen his employer angry before, but never this unhinged. Rami spoke of Anna with venom, his voice trembling with fury whenever her name came up. Karim followed orders, bugging her apartment, tracing her calls, surveilling her movements, but his loyalty was eroding. Every day he found himself thinking about how easily Anna could be his own sister, trapped and powerless under the weight of a man's dominance. Still, Karim lacked the courage to confront Rami directly. For now, he stayed silent, his conscience whispering louder with each passing day. Meanwhile, Layla's private investigator uncovered fragments of the truth. Photographs of Anna entering and leaving upscale restaurants with Rami. Records of transfers made from Rami's accounts that coincided with Anna's rent payments. And testimonies from staff who noticed her presence in places where Rami often conducted business. Layla pieced it together with quiet fury. Betrayal was not new in Dubai's high society, but this affair was different. It wasn't just infidelity. Was a scandal that could damage their family's legacy and ruin Layla's carefully cultivated reputation. She began contemplating her own next move, and whether a silence could be bought or whether a vengeance would taste sweeter. Anna tried to convince herself that leaving Dubai would be the safest option. She browsed flight tickets in secret, carefully deleting her search history each time. She even packed a small bag, ready to leave at a moment's notice. But something inside her hesitated. Running meant admitting defeat. It meant leaving behind her dreams, her independence, and the life she had built. Still, deep down, she knew her time was running out. Rami was not idle. He began assembling a plan so meticulously crafted that it scared even himself. There would be no loose ends, no possibility of exposure. He spoke to Karim in vague terms about the final solution, hinting that Anna's voice would soon be silenced forever. To Rami, this wasn't a crime, it was a necessity. He was convinced the only way to preserve his reputation and erase his shame was through eliminating the problem. Anna couldn't yet see the storm gathering around her, but the walls were closing in, and the glittering city that once dazzled her was about to become the backdrop of a nightmare she could never escape. Anna's unease grew into dread as subtle signs began to reveal themselves. One morning, as she left her apartment, she noticed her door slightly ajar. Even though she was certain she had locked it the night before, nothing appeared stolen, but items had been disturbed up. Book moved from the coffee table. A jacket draped differently across the chair. Her instinct screamed that someone had been inside, watching her life when she wasn't there. She brushed it off outwardly, but inside her nerves frayed like threads, ready to snap. Rami's patience was unraveling. He obsessed over Anna's every move, demanding constant updates from Karim. He wanted to know where she went, who she spoke to, and what she posted online. His obsession spiraled into paranoia. He became convinced Anna was plotting against him, perhaps preparing to expose him to the media or authorities. To Rami, Anna had transformed from a lover into a liability. He paced his study late at night, staring out across the shimmering city skyline, plotting scenarios with icy precision. Karim's role became darker. He found himself following Anna more closely, snapping photos of her walking alone, recording her conversations from a distance and reporting back to Rami. Each assignment weighed heavily on him. He admired Anna's bravery, but pitied her innocence. She had no idea how much danger surrounded her. Karim knew Rami's anger had crossed into something lethal, yet he remained torn down by loyalty, fear, and the knowledge that betrayal could cost him his own life. Anna, increasingly unsettled, confided in Sophie. She described the disturbances in her apartment, the strange feeling of being followed, and the relentless stress gnawing at her. Sophie urged her to leave immediately, offering to help arrange a flight out of Dubai. Anna agreed in words, but in her heart, she hesitated. Something held her back, an irrational hope that the storm would pass, that maybe Rami's anger would subside with time. But deep down, she knew the man she had once trusted was no longer someone capable of restraint. Layla, meanwhile, had reached her breaking point. The evidence her investigator gathered left no room for doubt. She imagined the whispers at social gatherings, the pointed looks from rivals, the shame of being a wife made a fool of. But more than that, she feared what Rami's recklessness could mean for their family's future. Layla began contemplating whether removing Anna from the picture might serve her own interests as well. The thought chilled her, yet it lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. As night stretched on, Anna began to notice a car idling near her building. Headlights dimmed. The same car appeared near her gym, and again at the cafe she often visited. Her pulse quickened each time she spotted it. The city that once felt alive with opportunity now felt like a labyrinth designed to trap her. Rami, determined and consumed, finalized his decision. There was no longer a choice in his mind. Donna had to be erased. To him, it wasn't murder. It was protection, preservation of power, a way to ensure no one could ever defy him again. He looked at Karim one evening and simply said, "It's time." Karim's silence was his only answer, but his heart pounded with dread. Anna's intuition told her something devastating was coming, but she had no idea how close the darkness truly was. Rami's decision shifted the air around everyone connected to him. Karim sensed it immediately. The clipped tone in Rami's voice, the cold stillness in his eyes, the silence that replaced casual conversation. Rami was no longer wavering. His mind was set, and his plan was already unfolding. Karim found himself drawn deeper into a conspiracy he had never intended to be part of, a silent accomplice to something that would shatter lives forever. Anna began noticing the tightening circle around her. Messages she sent to friends took longer to deliver, as if someone intercepted them. Calls dropped suddenly. Once, as she unlocked her phone, she found messages had been opened, though she had never touched them. She wondered if her privacy had been violated, and the thought chilled her to the bone. When she confronted her service provider, they dismissed her fears, but Anna knew something was wrong. She began to keep her phone turned off more often, afraid it was being used to track her. Rami followed her movements obsessively. Karim reported each detail, though his conscience screamed against it. He drove the same car Anna had spotted, deliberately shadowing her, ensuring she never forgot the presence lingering just beyond her reach. Karim hated the role, but fear chained him to Rami's command. Each time Anna glanced nervously over her shoulder, Karim's chest tightened. Knowing she was looking for him, but never realizing it was his eyes watching her. Layla's position became more complex. Though she had convinced herself that Anna's disappearance would solve her problems, she never imagined how quickly Rami would act. She attended dinners, smiled politely, and played her part in public. But inside she trembled. She feared her husband's ruthlessness as much as she despised his betrayal. Yet Layla chose silence, convincing herself that if Anna was gone, her own life would remain intact. She clung to the illusion of safety, blind to how quickly her world, too, was slipping beyond her control. Anna attempted one last escape. Sophie helped her pack a small bag and secured a plane ticket under a different name, scheduled for the following evening. For the first time in weeks, Anna felt a fragile hope. She kept her plan secret from everyone, certain that if Rami knew, he would never allow her to leave. But what she didn't realize was that Karim, ever watchful, had already discovered her intentions and reported back to Rami. That night, Rami prepared himself with unnerving calm. He studied Anna's flight details as if reviewing a business contract. In his mind, there was no room for hesitation. He believed she had forced his hand, leaving him with no other option. He instructed Karim to intercept her to ensure she never reached the airport. Karim wanted to refuse, to beg for mercy on Anna's behalf, but his throat closed with fear. He nodded instead, silently damning himself, as Anna drifted to sleep in her apartment. Clutching her passport and ticket in a drawer beside her bed, a storm gathered outside. The city lights glowed bright against the desert night. But for Anna, the world was already dimming. She believed she had one more day to find freedom. In reality, her time was nearly gone. The night Anna believed would be her chance to escape began with a deceptive calm. The city of Dubai shimmered under neon lights, its streets alive with tourists and quiet wealth. But in Rami's mansion, far from the noise, silence reigned heavy. He stood by a large window overlooking the skyline, a glass of dark liquor in his hand, though he barely touched it. His reflection in the glass looked colder than he felt, a man stripped of mercy, convinced that control was the only thing that mattered. Karim sat outside in his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles whitened. Every fiber of his being urged him to drive away, to leave the city and never look back, but fear had swallowed him whole. His phone buzzed with a message from Rami. "Tonight, no mistakes!" Karim closed his eyes, knowing that a line would be crossed from which there was no return. Anna, unaware of how much her plan had already unraveled, packed her essentials into a small bag. Passport, ticket, a bundle of cash Sophie had given her all tucked carefully inside. She wore plain clothes, hoping to blend in, and left her hair tied back. Every sound in her apartment seemed amplified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the occasional car horn outside. She tried to calm her racing heart, telling herself that by morning she would be thousands of miles away. Layla lay awake in her room, unable to sleep. She had pretended all day that nothing unusual was happening, but her thoughts betrayed her. Images of Anna's frightened face haunted her, alongside flashes of Rami's chilling determination. A part of her wanted to intervene, to warn Anna somehow, but fear strangled her will. She convinced herself again that staying silent was survival. If Rami was capable of destroying Anna, he could just as easily turn on her. As midnight drew near, Karim followed Anna from a distance. She left her apartment, glancing nervously over her shoulder, unaware of the predator-like focus that tracked her every step. She clutched her bag tightly and hailed a taxi, whispering her destination to the driver. Karim watched the car pull away before making a call to Rami, his voice shaking as he reported her movements. Rami's reply was chilling in its simplicity. "Bring her to me?" The taxi made its way through the bustling night, neon reflections flashing across Anna's anxious face. But as it neared a quieter stretch of road, a black SUV suddenly cut across the lane, forcing the driver to stop. Karim stepped out, his face pale, his eyes avoiding Anna's terrified gaze. She screamed at the driver to continue, but before she could react, the doors were flung open and strong hands pulled her out. Her cries echoed into the night, swallowed quickly by the hum of engines and the emptiness of the street. Her bag fell to the ground, spilling the ticket and passport across the pavement, trampled as the SUV sped away. Back in his mansion, Rami waited in silence. He knew by the time Anna was brought before him, there would be no turning back. The city continued to sparkle, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding in its shadows. For Anna, the dream of freedom was over. She was now a prisoner of Rami's ruthless will, trapped in the very world she had tried so desperately to escape. The SUV rolled through the darkened streets. Until it reached the private estate, Rami called home. Anna was dragged inside, her wrists bound, her voice hoarse from screaming. The marble floors glistened beneath the dim lights, and the air carried the sharp scent of incense that only deepened her sense of dread. She was forced to kneel before Rami, her body trembling as his shadow loomed over her. Rami studied her in silence, his eyes cold, his face void of emotion. For a moment, Anna dared to believe he might show mercy, but his words cut through the silence like a blade. He told her she'd insulted his pride, shamed his name, and that leaving was never an option. To him, her refusal had not only been personal, it had been a declaration of war. Karim stood to the side, his entire body taut with fear. His loyalty had chained him to Rami, yet every scream from Anna pierced his conscience. He wanted to look away, but Rami's presence demanded obedience. Each time Anna pleaded for her life, Karim's guilt grew heavier, though he remained frozen, unable to defy the man who had built and destroyed so many lives. Layla watched from a distance, hidden in the shadows of the corridor. She hadn't intended to be there, but whispers among the staff had drawn her curiosity. Now, she regretted her weakness. She covered her mouth with trembling hands as she saw Rami's rage manifest into action. Anna's final pleas filled the air, desperate promises of silence, of vanishing forever, but Rami's mind was made up. The act itself was swift, brutal, and calculated. Rami ensured that Anna's disappearance would be permanent, erasing the threat she posed to his power and reputation. The walls of the mansion bore witness to the cruelty, but within hours, silence returned, as though nothing had ever happened. To the outside world, Anna had simply vanished, another foreigner lost in the vast city. Karim was tasked with the aftermath. He drove through the night with a hollow expression, carrying the weight of a secret that could never be spoken. Each turn of the wheel felt heavier than the last, and every shadow on the roadside seemed like a ghost accusing him of complicity. By dawn, the evidence of Anna's existence had been scattered, concealed, and buried under layers of fear and silence. Layla retreated to her room, her heart pounding. She couldn't sleep, haunted by the memory of Anna's face in her last moments. Guilt gnawed at her, but so did fear. She knew Rami would destroy anyone who threatened his control, and she convinced herself that silence was her only means of survival. Still, she whispered Anna's name in the dark, a fragile attempt at keeping her memory alive. In the days that followed, whispers of Anna's disappearance began to circulate. Sophie, desperate and heartbroken, called repeatedly, her messages unanswered. Authorities showed little interest, reluctant to challenge the influence of a powerful man. To most, Anna's story was a fleeting tragedy, another disappearance lost in the noise of a glittering city that preferred shadows to truth. But for Karim and Layla, the memory could not be buried. Each day they carried the weight of what they had witnessed, knowing that behind the shimmering skyline lay a darkness few dared to confront. Anna's fate was sealed, her life cut short by the cruelty of pride and power. And those who knew the truth were condemned to live with the silence of complicity.